Okay, so welcome to our panel. I'm very happy to be here because it gives me a chance to work with my wonderful students again. Some left us already, so they will introduce themselves. My name is Karin. I'm one of the faculty members here at Stratford in this wonderful, lovely campus. I teach the UX class. Some of my students are in the audience here, waving. I also work at the main campus, kind of building a virtual incubator for entrepreneurs around the world. So I'm kind of in both ends. I do hands-on design work, but I also teach what I do during the day. So we're gonna have a couple of questions, but I want to make this really interactive. So we have that funky thing here that I will throw at you. So give us a sign if you have a question. I don't want this to be like an hour of us going back and forth. If you have a pressing question, and I'm looking at my students right now, because you know you have to have questions, otherwise I'll call on you and put you on the spot. So if you have anything you want to ask these guys and want to add something to the conversation, please do so. Let's open up this conversation from the get-go, okay? But I'll start with letting you guys introduce it yourself. Kelvin. By the way, Kelvin volunteered to come on the panel today. He had no idea this morning. One of the students unfortunately got sick, so I asked Kelvin, and here he is. That's why he has kind of a handwritten name tag and not an official.
Hi, my name is Kelvin. I'm a third-year GBDA student. I currently work part-time as a UX designer at a startup called GameLinks. It runs out of the Velocity Garage. And this summer, I'm going to be a design intern at Manulife. And Sadvika here is actually my boss for the summer. So. And one interesting fact about myself, I'm also a licensed private pilot.
Hey, I'm Daniel. I was a videographer intern for SAP Palo Alto over the summer. SAP is a huge multinational, if you don't know, and I'm actually going to be joining them again in Waterloo as a UI UX designer this summer. One interesting thing about me, I'm a second-year student here. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Julia Marielle and I'm a user experience researcher at Blue Dot, which is a startup in Toronto. I graduated from the psychology program from the main campus, so I'm a little bit different from these guys. But one interesting fact about me, I once gave up coffee for 6 months. I don't know if that's
Oh, brother.
yeah.
I love coffee, so it's hard to imagine.
Hello, my name is Sudar. I used to be an MDI, or I'm an MDI alumni. Currently, I work in Toronto at a healthcare technology startup called Think Research as a UX and UI designer. Interesting fact, I definitely can't top the pilot thing, but I lived in Amsterdam and worked at a tech company there for a little bit, and now I work here in Toronto.
Hey everyone, I am Sadvika Luther. I am a GBDA graduate, so I was one of the first cohorts that graduated from the GBDA program, and now I work at Manulife Financial. An interesting fact about me is I've been to 15 countries.
Okay, now it sounds really exciting. You all, SAP, Manulife, companies in Toronto, which is exciting. But I want to hear from you because there are a lot of students in the audience. How did you get from being a student? There's a couple of current students, grads. How did you get to that career you have now? So, what made you choose that path, or did the path choose you?
The path chose me.
Okay, do you want to elaborate a bit how
so
that happened?
I had no idea that I would be doing UX research, let alone make the switch from biology to psychology when I started as an undergrad on the main campus. But when I made the switch, I decided, you know what, make this switch, be as impactful as it can. And so what I did was I took part in many extracurricular activities, and I just followed my passion. And if I was interested in something, I just went out and grabbed the opportunity, asked the questions that I wanted to whoever I thought would be helpful. So that led me to an internship, attending Flexible, which is a conference that Bob runs, and yeah, just staying kind of curious and just excited.
Daniel, you want to add?
Yeah, so, I just applied for a job. I did a lot of video for a long time, for years, and I was like, okay, I can get a video job, let me get one. And I applied, and I got in at somewhere I didn't think, which was a design thinking team in Palo Alto, right near Stanford, doing video, which is fine for me. But while I was there, I realized I don't really want to do video. I want to go into design and into UX and UI, and there's kind of this idea evolved that like it's not necessary to go into like exactly what you want right away. It's like it works out anyway.
Nice. Anybody else? Calvin? How do you find your passion? How did you figure out? Because I really think our work should be our passion. If not, life can be very sad. So how did you find your passion?
Right, so I went to a very like small high school, and all my peers and my friends were, like, it was a very competitive environment, and then everyone was basically always on the honor roll. And I was on the honor roll too, but like somewhere near the bottom. So then I basically went through high school thinking that I wasn't like smart enough, I wasn't good enough, that I wouldn't have like any career prospects. And I thought like I'd just go to school, like university near my home, and just live in my parents' basement. But there's one thing that kept me, that was like constant throughout high school, was that I always, like since I think grade 6, I started like using Photoshop. And what I used it for initially was like I took pictures of cars, and like I used Photoshop, and like I slammed them, I put wheels on them, I put like different body kits on them, and I thought I want to be a car designer. But then like I talked to some people in the industry, and it's actually, you know, it wasn't what I thought it'd be. Like I wouldn't be creating these like beautiful like renders, and I wouldn't be responsible for the next, you know, model of whatever car. And then it's more like you work really hard, go through like industrial design school, and you'll probably be put on a team where you design like the left vent of this car for like 10, 15 years before you become a design lead. So I applied to this program just out of like my dad telling me that I should apply for Waterloo because it's a good school. And I thought, okay, well, it has like digital arts in the program name, like that could be cool. And I really only accepted the offer because they offered me money. But like after I came here, like, you know, I used to think, you know, UX design, what is that? Is it just designing apps? But going through all the classes and like just learning more and doing more and like taking on more side projects was what helped me like figure out what I wanted to do. Because all like your thoughts are just thoughts, right? Before you actually do something, like you can assume a million things, but until you actually try it, it's not, like, you can't really know that that's the reality. So like I tried, you know, dabbling in design and video and like graphic design and digital media here, and then I just figured out what I like doing from there. And that's why like I'm shaping my career to like go more towards user experience, more towards design. Yeah, so I'm glad I came here. If I didn't come here, I'd be, you know, commuting 1 hour, 2 hours to UBC every day. Oh, yeah, I'm glad I came here.
You brought up an interesting point, though, saying you only learn about the assumptions you're making by actually doing something, as opposed to sitting in your parents' basement dreaming about car design and realizing car design is actually something completely different. So I want to go back. Some of you graduated. If you think back to the classes you took, the things you learned at university, what are the things that are really useful now in your work practice? Or what are the things you maybe wished you'd learn a bit more or paid more attention to in university? Satvika, I know you're
I can take that one. So I work for Manulife, and I'm for the Canadian division specifically, and there are only 2 of us. Like, of all of Manulife Canada, there are only 2 designers on the team. Me and another GBD grad, actually. And when you're working for a company that's as big as Manulife and as old as Manulife, there are a lot of people, actually every single person, including my boss, that don't understand design. And one of the things we took for granted in GBDA was that everyone speaks the design language. I remember when we were taking Stephanie's class, we had to make style guides and explain why we were choosing these colors, and I thought it was so stupid. I'm like, come on, like, are you kidding me? Everyone can do this. Icons, you can tell. But when you're at a company, you're constantly defending your designs, like all the time. It's a job in itself. all the time, why are you picking these colors? You're fighting with the branding team, thinking that they would know because they're designers themselves. But Manulife is 125 years old, like I said before, and they're only print. They've always been print. So this switch to digital is really recent. So their color palettes and the fonts they're choosing are all for print. Explaining to these branding people what native design is really hard. So these are some of the things that like you're constantly defending yourself, your skills, and that's something I took for granted when I was in GBDA.
Julia, you were nodding when she was talking about defending the designs.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. So a lot of the things I learned as a psychology student was kind of the why would you do this research and kind of the hypothesis and trying to design a study that tried to answer those questions. And I was just like agreeing because a lot of the times stakeholders will come up to me like, why are we asking this question? Like, what is the value? And you really have to be able to speak up for maybe the design choice that you made because of the findings that you're applying. And yeah, so it resonated with me because it's something I experience basically every day at work.
So a sales course. And when I say sale, I mean defending your art, defending your work, to really stand up and present it with style guides and things like that would be very useful. Right? So, any other classes that you were, or things, tools or tricks you learned in school that were really useful now that you're out in the world? Sudar, do you?
When I was, is this thing on? Okay. Yeah, I'll use it. Okay. When I was here, one of the courses I took the least seriously was project management. I found it to be very boring, kind of mundane, just like so dry, and the material is so dry. I even took the PMP stuff once a week, and I found that at the time it was very, very useless. Like I was falling asleep. It was something I didn't really care about. But then when you get into actually working, you find how useful that actually is, and how having a good process and being aware of like project management processes actually matter, and like managing a project from the start to finish. So at the time, I wish I paid more attention, but everything I missed out on when I was here, I kind of figured out on the job. So yeah.
Interesting. So project management, again, some of our students complain here at GBDA that they have to work in teams all the time. It is by design. I know it's frustrating, but again, I mean, none of you probably work alone in well, you have a colleague, but none of you work alone. You have to, even if you work alone, you still have to go and present to your stakeholders, right?
Exactly. Like even if me and Deanna are the only designers on the team, there are 5 other developers that we're working with. So it's always a huge team, even if you are the only designer on the team.
So a question about happiness. Let's talk about happiness. People think we're designers, we have really cool jobs, we do work with nice interfaces and probably have really snazzy offices and things like that. But I want to talk about what makes a really good, conducive environment for design. And I know you probably work in some interesting offices. I could imagine Palo Alto has some nice places there. But what for you as young people, because I grew up working in cubicles. They were great because it's a neutral color. It's not distracting. Everybody started to put little flowers and photographs up. But what is it for your generation? What kind of workplace should we create for you if we want to hire you?
I think a lot of young people have this, this dream or this idea that when they graduate, especially a lot of people on this campus, I assume, when they graduate, they want to work at a place that, is like a Google type of an office, like open concept, lots of benefits, lots of fun things like candy and snacks and drinks and stuff. And that's almost like granted, like every company I've applied at, that's like a standard thing. One thing I did find to my surprise was an open concept office is something I always wanted to work in because I hated the idea of like working in a cubicle. I got an offer to work at Sun Life when I was done school, but at the time they were showing us around the office and it didn't resonate with me. Like I couldn't imagine sitting in a cubicle kind of isolated. It wasn't my thing. So the thing now is in my office, it's very open concept and it was fun for like the first couple of months, but time goes by and you realize how distracting it actually is to work in an office where everyone's super fun, laid back and talking to you all the time because sometimes you really got to get things done. You end up actually isolating yourself, sitting in a quiet room away from everybody else just so you can get things done. So that was surprising.
Kelvin?
So I currently work at the Velocity Garage, and like I think I'm going to speak more about not the physical environment, but like your coworkers. I think that's very, very important because So I work on a very small team. I'm the only designer, and there's 2 other developers and a marketing person. And what I find that I like the most about my job is that I'm not ever afraid to talk to them about a design. Like, even if it's a half-baked idea, even if it's not like the most polished thing, like everyone's open to discussion about, where we can go from here. Because like, I think it's important that everyone knows that no one person has all the answers, right? It all comes together when you talk about it, and like just having coworkers that support your ideas while you support theirs is very, very important for like a very happy work environment. Because like I walk into work and like I know whatever I make that day, like we'll get something out of that, rather than, like I don't think that I have to go in and make like a perfect design in order to make progress. So like physical environment isn't really something like, I guess if there's like a window and it's brightly lit, it's fine. For me, the more important thing is like the people I work with and like how open they are to new ideas and just listening. I think that's very, very important for like a positive work environment.
Sorry, that's a really interesting question because the office I work at, it's in a research center, like beside the St. Michael's Hospital, and how it used to be. So for a couple of months, it was the cubicle style. So I could see the dynamics. There were literally like walls in between people, and if you had to talk to someone across from you, you'd have to kind of scream over the wall or just go around. So it wasn't as conducive to that collaborative environment that Kelvin was mentioning. But then we switched over to hoteling stations, which if you guys, it's what it sounds like. So at a hotel, you can sleep in this room, but then the next day somebody else could be in that room, and it's the same thing with the desk. So you, I guess, rent the space out for a day. You don't have to pay, but that's the concept. And what that allows you to do is kind of, if you need to work with a developer closely one day, then you can sit right beside them. But if you need to work with epidemiologists or the statisticians, you can sit with them. So I think having that flexible, less rigid environment really works for me, and that's why I really enjoy working there.
I think that's a very interesting question. In our office, we had like a total open concept, and we even had 3 coworkers that didn't have tables. They would just work on their laptops the whole time. They would sit on a couch, whatever. But one of the most important things that we realized over the course of while I was there and just while we were working was that like quiet time and like work alone time, no distractions, no questions, was extremely important. Because you would have days where some people would just get like very little work done because so many questions come back and forth. You need to talk to, like, collaboration is amazing, of course, it's very important, but like you also need to spread out the time properly to have a mix of collaboration and a mix of like quiet sit down work time. And that's I think like open concept is definitely the way that everything is moving towards. That's no question about it because it provides collaboration, but there's some structure missing, I think, in corporations right now where there's not really a system set up for that quiet time. And that's where like we need to move forward too.
So in your practice right now, or in the past internships you had, did you feel like your work, your design has some business impact, or was it more separate? And how was that interaction between design and business? Because that's what we hear today. Do you have any insights or stories? Yeah, Sudar?
One thing that I find we struggle with at our organization is there's a disconnect between what the sales side and the business sells versus what we're actually designing and what's feasible. And then there's also a gap between what we would love to design versus what developers can legitimately build in a realistic time frame. So kind of aligning communication across an entire organization. Like our company is 140 people. So it's not small, it's not big either. So I find that in the sales team, they often try to oversell what we can actually do, and then clients kind of demand this, clients demand that, but they're kind of just saying it from the top of their head. So when it comes to us, we have to think about what makes sense to design for, like, our product strategy and what we actually want to get out of what we're building. And yeah, so there's often a disconnect between what we think is right for users versus what sales wants to just sell.
How could that be solved? What kind of ideas do you, because you guys are at the front line, so to speak, right? So are there any ideas how this could be improved? Could there be tools or ways to interact?
I would say involve designers in like meetings. I think our company didn't really have designers before. The developers kind of just built everything as the request kind of came in, so they didn't really consider considerations of users and people who actually use the products. They just built it based on business requirements. So when they finally did start hiring designers, I was the second person to work on our team. They never really included us in the process. They just would tell us what they would want and to solve the problem. But if we were there from the get-go, kind of understanding the problems, that would actually help save time and
Goes
make
back
things.
to that selling piece, right?
Yeah.
How do you be part of the conversation from the get-go?
Yeah.
I actually think educating your developers is extremely important. So like at SAP, and SAP is a company of 80,000 people. It does business-to-business software. You won't expect them to be innovative at all, but they are very innovative. They have a lot of design groundwork coming from the top. Like one of their founders put in like helped found the D School at Stanford. There's a lot of design there, especially in the office that I worked at. But what my team did in part was actually courses on design thinking and design. And so they offered a course to teach developers in our company what design was and why we use it and all of this kind of information. And I think that's very important, especially with huge companies. I'm sure Manulife too, where it's like we have 80,000 people.
Right.
If you have half of them or a chunk of them that are developers, you need to get them to understand what is going on, why you make choices the way you do, and that's very important. And I think that's a good way to do it. We had an online course, and I think that's
Nice,
decently
interesting.
way
So
good way to do it.
education. Yeah, Julia?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that a little bit. So for me, whenever I do work, I try to make sure that I'm being as transparent as possible and trying to include the people that's going to be, either building it or have some sort of stake in the idea. Just because people want that ownership, and you can really see the change when you keep people in the loop. Like tell the developers, oh, we're going out and doing this, and we're gonna maybe want to implement this, and so just look out for that, having that open communication and making sure that you're not siloed and you really are working towards like one common goal and really doing it together. I think that's really important and just something I wanted to add to that.
I want to ask you, because you work for one of the innovation labs, I don't know, you maybe want to talk a little bit about what kind of work you do and how that connection from your innovation center then back to Manulife, how that works
Yeah,
and
so-
the challenges with that.
So currently, I'm actually not working for the Red Lab. I am working for corporate Manulife. But I did 2 internships with the Red Lab at Manulife, and it was great. It was amazing. It was awesome. You could do whatever you wanted to. You could have all these amazing apps, all these amazing ideas. But at the end of the day, they never really went anywhere because there's so many constraints from business and technology constraints that they're not going to do. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to get a thumbs up, and that's awesome. And then that's it. It gets forgotten about most of the times, especially at the Manulife Innovation Lab. Which is why when my boss asked me if I want to work full time at Manulife Corporate, that was one of the things I asked. Is that what's going to happen? Because I don't want to be doing something for the next
Doesn't go
5
anywhere.
years that's not going anywhere. So that's when I made the switch to corporate Manulife, where the things I'm creating are actually going to market. And the thing about the business and the design work is that there are different projects within Manulife. For example, I'm working on 2 projects, group benefits and banking. Certain projects, for example, banking is more corporate, and they're not going to listen to a lot of the things that designers have to say because their attitude is yeah, whatever, they're just designers. Whereas I really see the difference when the group benefits people are talking to me, in which case they're asking me, what are the things we should include? Can you do some research about that? And it's not me fighting all the time.
Different approach, yeah.
I have some stuff to add on to that. My whole office was an innovation office there. Every single person there was working on innovation of some sort. And it is kind of hard to see the value prop, or in terms of it doesn't really go anywhere. People develop certain things, and sometimes it goes somewhere, sometimes it doesn't. But we had one part of our company that was I don't remember, I think it was called Build, and it was for basically prototyping. And they had innovated that, they had designed that, one of the teams had, and end up splitting off from our company and becoming their own company within like just separate from SAP, which is very weird, and it's hard for some of the higher ups sometimes to see the value prop of that. But there is a value prop because you are teaching, you're expanding what you do and the way that you do it in. And so my team, like we basically taught design thinking. That was what we did. And the higher ups, and we had a call where it was like 150 of the higher ups saw like a video that I had made and saw that some of the stuff that we were doing, and it's hard to see the value prop sometimes, and so you have to really like push that. And I forgot what I was gonna say. And that doesn't have to always go somewhere, but sometimes it does. And so sometimes it's actually very interesting to
So it also
be in
means
that.
you have to push a bit harder, right?
Yeah.
Like if you know these challenges, and I think a lot of designers in the room can relate to that. Often when people that are not designers, it's a bit harder for them to understand, and vice versa. I don't understand an engineer's mind very often. So something about lost in translation happens there. But
Yeah, I mean, my CDO pushed so hard for all this stuff because he knows that like we had taught courses at Stanford, for example, and it's not so much what's the value prop for SAP, what's the value prop for our next generation of leaders and innovators and people who make stuff, and that was what he presented, and they loved it.
okay, I want to go back a little bit to your career path. Again, I want to hark on that because there's so many different paths to take, and very often with young students, they think there is a successful career path and not so successful. So I want you to talk a bit about the failures and the shortcuts or the long routes you took and you got lost somewhere, because I think those are interesting stories too. So.
This is an area that I have a lot of experience in. The failing part, that is. So back in high school, so it started like way back then. I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I took a lot of courses that I thought would be interesting. And it turns out that I'm not very good at physics. So I almost didn't pass physics in high school, but you know, I'm still here, so I guess that's okay. Over here, like for the first 1 or 2 years, I was very convinced that there's one company or two companies that you had to get into to have a successful career. You know, like Google, Amazon, Facebook. Like I thought if you didn't get into one of those big companies, then you're basically a failure, like Cali or bust, right? So third year comes around, which is this year, and then I applied and didn't get an interview for either of those companies, and I thought my life was over. Well, it really wasn't over. It was just that I had to take a step back and really look at like whether or not it really was, you know, the end all to my career. Like it's not. I'm only like 20 years old, right? Hopefully I still have a lot of years left, and just because, like after talking to a lot of other people, my parents, talking to Karin, like I had to sort of accept the fact that, you know, just because you're not where you want it to be now, it doesn't mean that maybe 5, 10, 15 years down the road, like you could just end up where you want it to be or in some place even better. And the other aspect of it is, like I think failure sort of hits you the hardest when you're so sure that you're good enough for something, or you're so sure that you're going to get it. But like the reality of it is like you're one of the hundreds and thousands of people applying for maybe 5 openings. And you know, chances are there's people who are better than you because they put in more work, or because they've had more time to like experience different things, or they've just been at it for longer than you have. And that's not something you can do, but like what you can do is you can give yourself 2 or 3 days to mope around in bed after you get rejected. But after 3 days, you know, roll out of bed and see like what you can do to do better. And that's, I think, something that really did keep me going in the last couple of months. Like I have a job now, I'm employed, I can afford to buy, you know, brand name orange juice at the grocery store now. But you know, like I think what a lot of people don't see when they go through this program is the struggles. Like they always hear the stories of people who land jobs at Amazon. They always hear the stories of people who, you know, went to 2 internships by themselves and they got like a full-time offer. But no one tells the stories of people who like struggled along the way and like how they ended up in those places. And no one really talks about what they did to get to where they are. Like, I think it's very like common to just assume someone's talented, but you don't really talk about or think about what they did to like get that good. Like no one talks about putting in hours and hours in their own work. They only see the finished product, right? Because that's just what you show the world. So in between these months, what I did was I redid my portfolio, took a step back, asked a lot of people for feedback. I had to accept that what my application was for first round of jobs wasn't that great, and I had to change a few things. And for the new year, I took a challenge to do 1 new design a day, and I posted on Instagram just as the way to keep myself accountable. Shameless plug, follow Seizing Design on Instagram, where I'll post 1 new thing a day. But
There will be one of this panel today.
oh yeah, but yeah, like,
Actually, I want to intersect quickly. I love the fact that you were moping in bed for 2 days. You have to allow yourself to be a bit upset about failure, right? Nobody just gets up again. But then you pushed yourself, and I think that's what makes the difference, right? Nothing is ever easy for nobody in life. Everybody falls flat on their face. Some people stay there, others or blame the floor for it, right? So I love the fact that you got yourself up and you gave yourself kind of assignments. You know, nobody told you to post 1 design a day, and that's hard to do. So good for you. I think Julia, were you looking to add something to that?
Yeah, sure. I can. Oh, does this work?
Yeah.
It's working. Okay, sorry, this is weird. I just wanted to say that I was one of those people kind of growing up. I didn't know what my path was, and I found that as I asked more professionals, like some of the people that put this conference together, Marcus, some of my other, I guess, mentors, you realize that there is no straight line to success. Like there is no one formula, and it's gonna be different for everyone. And I mean, that sounds like so average of a thing to say, but it really is true. And so it's kind of just like you try this thing, and if it fails, like okay, reevaluate. Like what did you do, and was that something that you wanted to do in the first place? Was that something that you inherently, like inside yourself, said, oh wow, I love doing this, so I'm gonna keep going? Or is it something that you go, oh, maybe that's not my strength, and that's fine. Somebody else could be good at that, and so I can contribute kind of and play to my own strengths. And I think that's kind of how it goes for me, just like going with the flow, but also making sure that you're doing it kind of in a conscious way.
I like that. Also taking the time to look at yourself and look at your work, really, and open to sharing it with the world as well.
just like a quick addition, I think it's also important just to like when you're doing stuff and trying to get better, it's very like, you know, it's natural to look at who's ahead of you, right? Like where other people are at. But I think it's also worth just taking the time sometimes to just look behind you, like see how much farther you are from maybe your peers or maybe your friends or maybe other people. Like I think we miss that aspect a lot of the times. We don't realize just how far we've come personally because we're always chasing someone that's farther away. And just having that kind of perspective sort of helps too, and you're less stressed about it and you're more relaxed and you can do work without feeling pressured.
Nice. Sudar, you want
Okay, cool.
that red thing?
Yeah,
Is just
the feedback. When I got here today, I was walking around the campus for a little bit, just kind of looking at the rooms that I spent a bunch of time in, slept in, did a lot of work in, and just looking back on how far I've come, like again, like Kelvin was saying, just it's sometimes hard to reflect and think about how much you've accomplished or what you've done because you're always looking ahead. Looking back to when I was 17 and you know you're in that final year or the second last year of high school and you have to decide what you want to do for the rest of your life and you have to apply for a bunch of college or university programs and you randomly choose something because you think you got to choose something or because your parents tell you what's good for you. I remember in grade 11, I dropped all my math and science courses because my dad had told me my entire life that if you don't choose a career in math or sciences, you're doomed, you can't get a job. So despite him, I took only arts courses. I took only arts courses and then applied to a program at Laurier for just a general arts program, like an honors bachelor's honors of arts, but you can specialize in whatever you wanted later. So I like the ability to kind of figure it out as you went. So when I was there, I just decided that I like sociology and communication studies, two very random things, but I kind of followed that through. But by the end of it, at school, they're always like the business kids would always tell you, you're not going to get a job with your arts degree. How are you going to get a job with your arts degree? And at that time, I was like scared shitless. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So I think it was my 4th year when I was walking around this graduate school fair around our campus, is when I met Christine McWebb, and she had this a bunch of like pamphlets for MDEI. And it seemed kind of cool in the sense that, again, it was a program that taught you a bunch of different things and you can kind of figure it out. So I got in, I came here, and even when I got here, I still had no idea what I was going to do. But I knew I had an interest in like digital media, digital marketing, and everyone was talking about UX, and it sounded like this cool thing. I don't know if it was the letter X or something about it sounded really cool. So I got here and I met a bunch of interesting people, and I've always took it upon myself to, go out to those extracurricular events, stuff like this, and just meet as many people as possible, because I found that every person I talked to shaped the way I thought about what I want to do next. And, a year for a master's program, like, it is a sufficient amount of time, but not enough time to learn everything you want to learn. So I kind of just picked the 2 things that I found the most interesting. And at that time, it was like design, like product design, and then digital marketing. I really like social media and then using digital media in marketing. So I remember at the time I was spontaneously looking for internships on top of the final year end project we had to do. And my roommate and I, who was also in the program, we started applying to internships like everywhere, like San Fran, Europe, like in Amsterdam and stuff. So me and him both got interviews at this one company in Amsterdam. I went all the way through with the process, and then in the end, he didn't get the job, but I did. And afterwards is when I was like, oh, well, now I got to deal with, the faculty and asking them permission to go. So that was a whole process in itself, but I negotiated with them, and I took this internship in Amsterdam for this startup where I was working at digital marketing / UX kind of role. It was kind of a dream thing, right? Because I barely had any idea what I was doing. I just learned enough to fake myself through the interviews and convince them that I was legit and that they should hire me. So that went well, and then I settled everything here, moved to Amsterdam, and worked on my master's project remotely over the internet using Skype and everything with my team while I was working full-time there. And by the end of that internship, I realized that digital marketing was interesting, but at that point I was more interested in UX, because I talked so much to people in my company who were working on the product itself. Then I realized I want to pivot into UX, but I just spent the last 8 months of my life just shaping myself into a digital marketer. So I was like, then what? So then I came back and I went to meetups, I talked to other designers, and I kind of faked that and kind of like learned how to talk like a designer and be a designer and work on some projects, and suddenly I got hired at my current job. So I don't know, I forgot which one of my profs told me, but they said like fake it till you make it. And that's good to an extent, especially I find when you're like starting off your career. Because I don't know, how would you as like a 20-something-year-old really know everything you're going to do for the rest of your life? I might change my career a year from now or 2 years from now, but I find just like go with it and kind of just do everything you can to shape yourself and your experiences, and you'll eventually land somewhere that's good for you.
You made a nice segue into my next question. Daniel, you have something pressing you want to? No? Okay. So I wanted to ask, design is changing so quickly and technology is changing. How do you guys stay current? How do you keep learning, the ones that are graduated or the ones in school? And I'm not just asking the classes you have. Like, what are you doing to stay current? You were saying you're talking to people and learning from others. So how do you push yourself to stay current?
I copy a lot of people. So like it's very good because nowadays we have like places on the internet where people can post their work and you can see it for free. Like Dribble, Behance, Instagram, people write about design on Medium. But I think like for me the best way to learn about new design trends was just to see what was popular on these platforms. And by copy I don't mean like copy paste, that's not very ethical, but like you sort of learn by like recreating designs and making your own twists on them. And like since it's always evolving, like it's good to always check up on those platforms and read about what people write. And like what people write it's not always correct because they're humans too, right? Like they could predict a trend that isn't gonna go through for more than a couple months. But like I think it's still good just to look at everything and try it all and see what you like, because I think trends happen because people make it popular. So like along with, copying designs, you make your own, adjustments, you make your own changes, you make your own style, and I don't know, maybe like what you make could be the next trend. But to do that, you have to be current with what people currently post. So that's like the #1 way, I think, just to stay current.
So is there anything else other than just looking at Dribble and Behance and all these places? Something that's maybe a bit unconventional, some areas you're researching or reading, or certificate you have?
Yeah, so, yeah, sure, you can read all the magazines, stay current, but another thing to look into, and this is where kind of like the business part of global business and digital arts comes in, is look at what companies are buying and selling. For example, BMO last week made their Interact feature free, which means that other banks will probably follow this trend, which means that you're going to start seeing more P2P, apps on the App Store. So these are some of the things that are like super interesting. Like for example, banking for me is super interesting because I work for Manulife. So these are the kind of trends that we look at, that what are these other banks doing that are not design trends specifically, but will impact at least the things you start seeing in design.
I like that. I think that's an excellent way or area to look into. Julia?
Is this on?
It just looks funny to speak
it's
into
just
that
like kind of a prop
fuzzy
there.
square.
So how I like to do it is I attend conferences, and I really like to discuss ideas that people are, kind of sharing on Medium, whether it be at talks at the Mars building, just setting up kind of reading groups that kind of just get your brain thinking about different things that you might not have thought about, and trying to do side projects. I think that's really also an important thing to do.
Okay, I want to open it up to the audience. So I know my students all prepared questions. Looking at you guys. Yes, Jeff? Shall we throw the thing at you? Okay. Whoa. Okay. Somebody will get hurt. Nice.
So maybe you guys can talk, especially those of you that are working full-time in big organizations, can you talk a little bit about imposter syndrome? And like, is it something you struggled with? How did you get past it and go from being, I'm a fresh graduate, to someone who can speak with authority and defend your own ideas? And then maybe Karin, you can tell me, does it ever go away?
The quick answer is no, but I'll let them go first.
That's a really good question. So when you say imposter syndrome, do you mean just like how do you go from being someone
So
who
how do you
doesn't
go
know?
from being someone who feels like you're just making it up as you go along and like, I'm totally unqualified to do this and really I don't know anything more than anyone else, to being someone who's like, I feel really confident in what I'm doing?
Sure, I thought that's a great question. As I was saying before, like that fake it till you make it thing only takes you so far. Maybe it gets you your first job, maybe you get your foot in the door, but then you really got to know what you're talking about. I found, since there's a lot of job openings now for like design in so many companies because they see how valuable it is and how necessary it is in organizations, but in many ways you probably are a domain expert. In many ways you probably do know a lot more than most people do. I found that what helped me was whatever job I picked, I made sure I could be in a place where I have mentorship from somebody else, and you kind of learn from them, kind of follow them along, and then eventually you get to a point where you're just comfortable. I found it took me like a year to get to a point where I was actually just doing my own thing, leading my own projects, and could actually just do my thing and not have to think twice about it. It's just building confidence, I think. So the more you do, the more projects you handle, yeah, just your experience grows, and I find that at one point or another you feel comfortable enough to feel that you're not an imposter anymore, but that always changes. So
Yeah, actually, like all the time, sometimes I'm sitting in meetings and I'm like, man, I just really shouldn't have this job. But at the end of the day, like you have to really do your research before you start doing something. That's when your UX, design thing comes into place. You're actually researching the things you're going to be talking about at these meetings. And it's interesting because you're always feeling like you're unqualified, but the other person you're talking to, especially if it's business, they also are unqualified. I mean, you are more qualified than they are in these things. So I think it's kind of stepping back and being like, okay, no, yes, I can do this. They can also, they have no idea what I'm talking about, so I have to kind of educate them. A lot of it is just educating yourself and other people.
I think one thing I learned over the years is it's totally okay to say, I don't know. It's a bit easier when you're older. It's much harder to do when you're just starting out. This costs you a bit more. But it's totally okay. Said, I have absolutely no clue. But then you go back, do your research, and come back with an informed decision. So, one of you wanted to ask? Okay. Okay, who else? Yes.
What do you tell your parents that you do?
Great question. What do you really tell your parents you do?
I tell my parents, like, English isn't their first language, so I have to translate everything back into Mandarin Chinese. I just tell them, like, I study business, but my main focus is, like, designing software. Like, that's the closest definition that they understand, because they don't know I don't know how to say user experience in Chinese. Like, I honestly don't. And I'm pretty sure, like, if I did translate it, they wouldn't know what that meant anyways. But, like, you know, I tell them, but they don't actually question it that much. They just sort of, like, trust that I'll not be jobless. So that's, like, I guess I'm blessed with, like, understanding and open parents. Yeah.
Graphic design, for those people who don't know what graphic design is, art.
I just tell them, Mom, Dad, I'm going into work, and they're like, okay, that's cool. I mean, they trust that I've done kind of my due diligence to kind of put myself on this path, and they see that I'm like enjoying it, so they kind of
You're going somewhere on a regular basis with a paycheck. which is a
something
good-
like that.
Nice.
Yeah, same thing as Calvin. I just tell my parents I design software for doctors and nurses and people who work in hospitals, and that to them is good enough. Yeah.
Cool.
So funny story for me, my dad is an art director and my mom is a designer, but it's really interesting how people don't know the difference between UI and UX. So my parents, for the longest time, thought I was doing graphic design, and they were like, why are you in GBDA? Go to OCAD. Do, like, learn design. You don't even paint. You can't even draw. Like, what do you mean you're doing design? So it was kind of hard for me to explain what UX was to them. And then at the end of the day, I just told my mom, Mom, you know those questions you asked me of how to use these apps? I just design it so you don't have to ask me anymore.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, I would love to get some questions from first-year students. And if you make eye contact with me, you know what's happening. Jamie? Whoa.
All right, okay. What's the coolest project you guys have gotten a chance to work on, and what did you take away from it?
Good question. Oh, Julia needs a microphone.
Yeah, great question. I actually am helping build basically a project from the ground up. It's still kind of in development phase, or just trying to get the ideas rolling. But in the process, I've done research on people that I never thought I could be capable of kind of interviewing. So doctors, obviously, they have really high education. It's pretty intimidating sitting in a room with them. But then when you kind of get that rapport established with them, you go, okay, now I can understand what your real problems are and how we can build better, I guess, design for you. So that's something that we're working on right now.
Sorry, okay.
No, cool.
One of the things that I worked on was a chatbot for health insurance, and it doesn't sound cool, but I just thought it was, I just thought it was amazing that I could make something as boring as health insurance fun.
Interesting.
The coolest project I've ever worked on, I'm currently working on it, so I don't think I'm really allowed to talk about it, so I'll talk about the second coolest project. So GameLinks built a game for TEDxUW, and it's a game that allowed pretty much everyone in the audience to participate, and I was responsible, like entirely responsible for the artwork that would accompany the game. So like from the ground up, from sketches to the final product to the animations, that was all me. And it was really cool because like as you're doing the project, you sort of think, well, it's just a small part of the project, right? Like the development and all the code is like where the meat of the, the game is. But like artwork really does make a difference to something like a game because it's what people look at, right? And it was just really cool to me because people were having like a blast playing the game, but they probably wouldn't have had as much of an like a fun impact on them if the game was just like a text-based, game. So to me, it was just really cool because I got to see my work on the big screen, and like maybe the work isn't as technical as what other people do, but just seeing like the fruits of my labor basically for the first time was really cool.
Okay, so we have a couple minutes left. I want you guys to end with giving some advice to our undergrad students. What should they be doing right now to get ready for an internship, a career afterwards, a summer job? What are the kind of things from your experience that were really useful that helped you get to where you are today? Just one after the other. Yeah.
Practice and chill out. It's all gonna be okay.
Okay,
So-
chill out.
For me, kind of going back to the question you had before this was kind of how I came to this
Yep.
position. All throughout my life, I wanted to become an engineer. And when I was in grade 11 and grade 12, it hit me that I couldn't do math for shit. Like, I was so bad at math, it was unreasonable. So I always had the feeling that I was never good enough. And then, similar story to Kelvin, when I applied for the first round of internships, I didn't get a single interview. So that kind of feeling of not being good enough came back. And it was really hard. It was like, I understand all of you, if any one of you is feeling that they're not good enough, it's not always gonna be like that. When I applied to Manulife, I actually applied, I didn't even want to apply for Manulife. My sister was like, just do it, just do it, you never know. It was a dev role, and I was 100% sure I wasn't gonna get it. So I went into the interview. I was happy enough that I got the interview in the first place. And then I went into the team as a designer, and that's when the role really grew on me, and it was something I really didn't expect. So my advice to all of you is just apply everywhere, and you never know what's gonna work out. Yeah, apply everywhere.
I'm pretty sure Susan is happy to hear that. She's
Yeah.
beaming from the background. Susan takes care of our internships and projects and things
Yeah,
like
and
that.
you never know how it's going to be. Like, for example, I have the opportunity now to hire other co-op students, and that's the advice I even told Kelvin during the interview, that don't worry about it. It's going to work out, even if you don't pick Manulife, there are going to be a billion other companies that are going to want you and your skills.
Sudar, you have a whole list of things, I think.
I like writing things down. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I found when I was looking for work, obviously have your LinkedIn up to date, because what's interesting working as a UX designer is that right now, at least right now, it's a career that's in high demand. So if your portfolio and your LinkedIn look pretty legit, people will reach out to you. That's what I found the most surprising, because right about the time when I was actually ready to start looking for work, just like recruiters started messaging me, and that was like a really cool feeling, because I never thought like that's something that would happen to me. So yeah, just have everything looking good and legit, and just be on top of that. I found going to meetups and open house for startups and things like that helped a lot, because you can say like, oh hey, I'm a designer, I'm interested in a job, and then they'll ask you questions, and then if you can't answer those questions, I'd say you're not ready to work there, so you should fix those things. So when I was switching from being like working in digital marketing to working as a designer, the first question that somebody at a company called 500 Pixels asked me was like, all right, what's your design process? And at the time I was like, oh man, I don't know. So I just made it up, and they could tell that I was completely full of it. So then I went home and I just read up on what design process. I had an idea, but I just wasn't sure, right? So getting on top of that kind of helped me do better in interviews and kind of talk more confidently about how I do my work. I have a bunch, but I'll just get to it quick. But when you're looking for companies to work at, I know it sounds awesome to work at an Amazon or an IBM and stuff like that, and I'm sure it is. But I have friends who work at small companies, medium-sized companies, and super large companies. And right now, being one of two designers who works at a company of 140 people for a healthcare company, being one of two people on a team for a company of that size is interesting, because you get to work on so many different projects, so many different products. It was so hard to answer that question about what's the coolest thing you've done, because when you're at a smaller organization, you have the flexibility to work on so many different things. Whereas I have friends who work at IBM, friends who work at Amazon, and it's all right, you're on one team for one product, working on one small thing, like his car door example, you're working on that one feature, and that's it, and you're just working on feature updates. So it might sound cool to work at Snapchat or all those things, but those things have already been made. So if you got a job there, sure, you might be innovating some ways, but the companies that truly need the innovation and that kind of design help are financial companies or healthcare organizations and stuff like that. Those I find are the places where you can actually make the most impact. And I know it doesn't sound as sexy as working at all these other companies, but really you can make change there. And I think that's what's important to consider when looking for
Very good.
work.
So Julia, I'm gonna let it end with you. What? Oh, Kelvin. Oh, Kelvin looks shocked. No, okay. Okay, we'll let Kelvin go first. short, and then we only have a minute and 30 seconds.
Yeah, just two things. First, be humble. Like, if you can't, walk the talk that you talk, then don't, you gotta know that you might think you're really good, but you're probably not that good. So the second thing is practice. Like, practice, practice, practice. It's really important just, for me, it's to do something every day. Because if you don't practice, then you can dream up all these great ideas, but then if you can't execute them, then, all your ideas aren't worth shit, right? So practice and stay humble.
Okay, very well.
So I'm just going to say use your network. I think that's really important, and that's helped me a lot in my kind of career search. If you know someone that you might be interested in working with, or just want to practice kind of answering interview questions with them, I think that's really helpful. And you also have to really believe in yourself. Like, you know that you are passionate about learning, at least at this stage. When you're a new grad, hiring companies aren't going to expect you to be able to solve all their problems, but they're going to hire you because of your enthusiasm, your passion, and your kind of willingness to learn and admit to yourself that, oh yeah, I have a lot to learn, but you know what, I'm up for the challenge.
Very well, thank you so much. And I'm totally happy to follow your path on all the social networks we're connected to, and I'm always interested to hear what you guys are up to and what you're working on. And so thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for listening for an hour. This is awesome. Thank you.